Hey guys, my name's Nate Van Kampen, and I'm just going to put together a few little videos for my teacher inquiry project. I feel like it's probably easier to maybe explain it through a video than for you to try to understand kind of what I've done through a few bullet point slides. I do have some slides and I'll embed the video in, but I'm going to just work through a few of the slides and kind of expand on some of the ideas on there just to explain what I've been up to this semester for this AQ course and some of the things I've learned. So here we go. The first piece here, and I'm going to just kind of be looking off to my other thing, is you'll see on the slideshow just a quick table of contents, and so I'm going to kind of divide up this presentation to explain the rationale behind the teacher inquiry project I conducted. My inquiry question, some key definitions that I want to try to expand on through this video to help understand kind of what exactly I was getting at, and then some methods. So kind of what did I do in my class with my students, how did I collect data, and then that'll probably be where the first video ends, and then I'll do a little second video discussing my results, and then some applications, implications, next steps for that. So the first piece is, the title of it is Teacher Inquiry Project-Based Learning with English Language Learners. And so a bit of background, the context that I teach in is we're encouraged to use a lot of project-based learning. In the past, some of our ELL teachers here have seen that sometimes there's a bit of a tension to have kind of inquiry when language so often is a skill development, not an inquiry piece. I think the two actually go together, but I wanted to do some research to figure out some of the strengths and weaknesses. I think a lot of times people talk about the threats or the drawbacks from a certain pedagogy as opposed to looking for the opportunities. So I'm hoping that this inquiry project looks for some unique opportunities that project-based learning holds for the language learners in our building here, and hopefully beyond this building. So I kind of wondered about the opportunities that provided and the barriers that PBL may present to a language learner, and I hope to maximize the benefits. Authentic audience, real-world learning, critical thinking, collaboration, etc. So if you're familiar with project-based learning, these terms may be familiar to you. If you're not, they may be new. But I also want to mitigate some of the barriers. Sometimes there's a lot of text-heavy inquiry or a need for language-based scaffolding, heightened anxiety of presenting in a second language, and that's the piece I think I really want to key on. So leads me to my question: what is the impact of project-based learning with an authentic first language audience on the development of English language learners' oral communication skill development? So if English language learners are tasked with presenting to first language peers, then their engagement in developing oral communication skills will increase. At least that's what I think. So the theory behind project-based learning, and if you skip to the next slide, you can kind of see some definitions here. It's an inquiry approach. You can read through the quotes. Let me try to explain it in my own words. Really, it's an idea where we have an authentic task that we try to connect to something beyond the classroom. It starts with some sort of entry event or an experience that the students kind of creates a bit of mystery or wonder, and that leads into a big question, or what we call a driving question for the project. The next phase is an inquiry cycle on how to solve the question. So similar to inquiry-based or expeditionary learning or some of these other kind of inquiry-based models that different boards are familiar with, one of the characteristics of project-based learning is that there's a final product that you create, whether it's a presentation or a physical thing or a media piece. And then there's often a presentation of your learning to hopefully what we call an authentic audience. And so there's a little video there. And a key aspect to project-based learning is authenticity. When students know their work will be sharing their learning with others, their work needs to be relevant for themselves and their intended audience. I think that connects to language learners, but I think it presents some challenges too. You can learn language in a vacuum, But if you don't have a purpose and an audience for speaking, then it's not really a useful communication tool. And so I'm hoping this pedagogy creates the authentic purpose for learning the language and puts a little bit of pressure on students to have to actually put the work into developing the skills so they're able to communicate effectively, not just up to 70% of a standard, but did your audience get it? Were they engaged? So I tried to develop a task that sees what that's like for them. The next slide here has a bit of a graphic on it, and the graphic kind of shows that the theory is that as you increase risk and distance in your presentation audience, so the kind of the lowest one would be just to a teacher to fulfill a requirement, then maybe a class presentation, to parents, to the school community, to a public beyond the school, share with people or professionals who are capable of critiquing, and then maybe there's a social justice piece. Can you actually get out into your community and share your learning in a way that helps your community or helps folks in your community? And so each one of those steps is riskier for the teacher and the student, and the theory is that the motivation increases. But my question then is kind of tied into that zone of proximal development. How much stress is too much stress that would be debilitating and discouraging, and how much is just the right amount of good stress to kind of push student performance and increase motivation to develop the skills required? So I kind of have a few more definitions of oral communication skills based on the curriculum, but I'm not just talking about correct pronunciation and grammatical structures. I want to know if students are able to present and speak and engage an audience and communicate a message through their tone, through their pacing, and is it received well and understood? So it's not just a matter of checking boxes on a checklist, which we do, but I had written down here that their overall ability to engage an audience. So that involves things like pace and letting their personality shine, and even if it's not perfect, are they understood? Did they communicate? Yes or no? And so here's what I did. About 2 months ago, I combined with, this is an ESL DO class of about 11 students. At the same time, there's a section of ESL EO. This EO class last semester or last year participated with another teacher in a teaching a skill project where they had to teach a skill and plan out the steps and rehearse and make sure that they've thought everything through and that they were effectively communicating, and they wrote out their instructions and that kind of thing. And so we collaborated together to have the ESL EO class kind of be coaches from my DO class on how to teach a skill, some of the lessons that they learned along the way from mistakes about not being prepared or not writing out their script with enough detail. So some of these things. So we thought, what if we, and we have access to the kitchen at our school, what if we combined with our food and nutrition class and we would present the ESL DO class a dish that they would cook and prepare and then share with the food and nutrition class. The food and nutrition class would then learn how to cook, use from the presentation, learn how to make the dish, and then repeat the recipe back to us. That would really show us if they received our instructions well. So that was kind of the task that we presented to them. So we started, before we presented them with that task, we had a class trip to a large kind of multicultural grocery store where they were able to get some ideas about food that they know how to prepare, or things from their home culture that they loved, and stuff that they liked. And so we spent some time there, and they bought a few ingredients. They knew they were going to have to cook a dish at some point, and so they bought some ingredients and they had a little lunch of their own. And we came back to the school, and then we presented them with this question of how can we create a dish for the food and nutrition class that shows a part of our home culture. And so we started doing that. We kind of worked together the next day with the ESL EO class and started breaking that down. So what is a presentation? How do you teach a skill? We had the ESL EO class come up with a list of tips. I created an assignment that kind of walked through the steps in terms of creating a script and some of the requirements and learning goal success criteria. And they worked together with I had 2 students with the DO class partner with 1 EO student. So they had small groups. They started thinking of some ideas, and then they got to work writing their script. So they wrote their script, practiced on their own without the EO student with them. The EO student went back to their class and did their lessons. A few days later, we got back together again. The DO class practiced their presentation or presented it without actually cooking the food, but kind of just a bit of a mock run through it. The EO student had a checklist based on some of their tips and also based on the EO and DO, my tips. So they gave some meaningful feedback about their presentation. Students applied that feedback, rewrote a bunch of their scripts. Next step, we went with our EO partners to the foods room. We didn't actually cook it, but we kind of got in the physical space where they would be presenting. They kind of gave it a bit of a more formal presentation, kind of mocking or doing a kind of a mock-up of the food, not actually cooking it, but using some of the tools to try to figure out the timing of it. Again, got a lot more feedback from the teachers and from myself, the other teacher, and then their student mentor. Went back, and then the next week they presented to the food class. So that happened this week. And then at the end of that, they again got more feedback on how it went. I used a rubric to kind of assess that, so that's where some of the data is coming in. And then I had them last night write some reflections where I asked them about the effective audience on how they perceived kind of the riskier audience of not just presenting to another ESL class, but to the food and nutrition class, with the purpose of them learning well enough that they could recreate, the dish that they made. What effect that had on their perception of their own learning, of their skill development, of their motivation. And so I'm going to go and end this video for now. And I'll embed another video down lower in the presentation where I sort of reveal and discuss some of the findings, how the students perceived it. I'm going to post below some slides, some sample data, some quotes, as well as some quantitative stuff, or because I kind of have a baseline from a presentation they've done before with a similar rubric, and I'm going to now compare those 2 rubrics of this presentation with their previous one and see if there's a change there. And so we'll have a little bit of that data, but I think the more interesting and revealing data will be the student self-perception of their learning based on the audience and the reflections that they've completed. So I will end it here for now. Hopefully the slides that follow this video will now make some more sense, now that you can kind of track through and try to add some detail to them, and then I'll post another video halfway down through the presentation.